There's a ton of awesome stuff that's going to be coming in a future release of JIRA that will be, and when we break APIs, it'll be called JIRA 7. And to cover all the awesome stuff, we needed at least 3 people. In the true spirit of collaboration, we have 2 people from Poland and 1 person from Sydney that all work together on one presentation for JIRA 7. So we're going to start with Bartek and Philip from our Gdansk office, and they're going to cover...
Morning.
Yeah, that's them. They're going to cover kind of what we've done and where we're going with JIRA 7, and then Ian Grunnert from the Sydney office is going to take over and kind of dive in deep in terms of how this is actually going to affect the code for your plugins. So without further ado, Bartek.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I really appreciate the fact that you have showed up in the morning after Summit Bash. Before we start, I have a question. How many of you have already created an add-on for JIRA? All right. How many of you plan to create an add-on for JIRA? All right, quite a few. That's a good news. So welcome to JIRA 7 for Developers presentation. This is going to be a 2-part presentation delivered by 3 people. And in no point in time, we will meet on the stage together. My name is Bartek Gac, and I'm a JIRA developer.
My name is Filip Rogaczewski.
I'm a JIRA product manager. Sorry.
I'm a JIRA developer. I'm a developer.
That's the early hour. I'm sorry.
You want to continue? I already said my name.
And Filip is a developer.
Yes.
All right. So in the first part of this presentation, we will cover, together with Filip, we will cover 3 elements. We will speak about the history of add-ons platforms for JIRA. We will dive specifically into Atlassian Connect platform and the capabilities of that platform. And then we will take a look at what is coming in JIRA 7 as seen from the add-on developer perspective.
And then Ian will take over the stage, and he will dive into the juicy technical details. He will talk with you about the changes in JIRA implied by our data center offering. He will talk with you briefly about how to do web resources properly, and then he will remind you what are the communication channels in which we communicated the changes which are happening in JIRA platform.
All right. So the title of this presentation is called JIRA 7. And as you know, our API policy allows us to break the APIs only in major releases of JIRA. However, it is being discussed right now whether we will deliver 1 more release before JIRA 7 goes out. So just keep that in mind, that all the API breaking changes that we will speak about during that presentation may only happen in the major release of JIRA. It is not clearly decided yet whether JIRA 6.4 will be released, and equally the dates are not clear yet. We are working inside Atlassian in a truly agile way, and the dates are derivative of the scope and basically what we find on the way. But we can clearly speak about the dates that have happened in the past. So let's take a look at a bit of a history of add-on platforms in JIRA. Almost exactly 10 years ago, we have released JIRA 3.0 with the first plugin system for JIRA. At that time, it was simply called a plugin system for JIRA. But later, it evolved together with its name. And today, you know this plugin platform as the P2 plugin platform. It's a really successful platform. In fact, the vast majority of add-ons are created on that platform. As of today, there are over 660 add-ons created for P2 in JIRA and available on the marketplace. But keep in mind that, first of all, this number only represents those add-ons that are on the marketplace, and only those that were created by external developers, by vendors, not by Atlassian. So the overall total number of all the add-ons created by P2 is much, much higher than that. So after releasing P2 platform, we of course haven't stopped at that point in time. In October 2010, we have released JIRA 4.2 together with its first public and stable REST API. And 2 years later, in February 2012, we have released JIRA 5, where this REST API was greatly improved, made much more stable, together with the Java API. And later, the very same year, we released JIRA 5.2 with webhooks. So all of that combined allowed you to create the P2 add-ons that were working in the same Java virtual machine where JIRA is, as well as build a number of GUI-less interactions, GUI-less integrations between external systems and JIRA. So we had a very successful plugin platform, a great and fantastic ecosystem of developers building hundreds of these add-ons there. And then we decided to make it a bit more complicated. In June 2008, we have released our first hosted system for JIRA. At that time, it was called JIRA Studio and has later evolved into JIRA On Demand, later again renamed to JIRA Cloud. This allowed the users of JIRA to use the software as a service offer of JIRA and be able to much faster start the JIRA instance and not worry about things like the server or the database. It has become a very successful offer from the very beginning. So let's look at these numbers. You can see the comparison of the new users, of the growth of usage between the server type of deployment and the cloud type of deployment. As you can see, the cloud is accelerating much, much faster. In fact, as of today, around 2/3 of our new customers are choosing cloud over server deployment. So the popularity of that platform was growing, but what about all those P2 add-ons that were created for JIRA? Well, with the cloud offer, we did not provide the users with the full access to all the administrative settings because it was basically dangerous. And therefore, the P2 add-ons were not possible to be installed with the JIRA Cloud. So we thought, well, maybe we can install these add-ons for the users. And we have actually started in that process. We have bundled several of the successful add-ons with JIRA. And then we have stopped.
We stopped because we realized that this approach won't scale. We can't provide a good quality service for our users with hundreds of add-ons running on the same virtual machine as JIRA, competing for resources. A single error in any of these add-ons could potentially bring several JIRA instances down and could be a serious threat for our entire offering. Finally, JIRA is changing very, very fast. We deploy the new version of our cloud services a couple of times per month. We can't keep up with this development speed if we have too tight coupling with external vendors. So we had a gap. We had a very high customer demand for more JIRA add-ons in cloud, and we had a platform which couldn't address this requirement. Bartek has already mentioned that we have previously invested in our platform. We allow the add-on to set the data in JIRA using our REST API. We allow the add-on to listen for the changes using webhooks. But we still have one very important piece of puzzle missing here. And this piece of puzzle is UI integration. Without UI integration, add-ons can't bring more user-visible features for people using JIRA Cloud. So we came up with UI integration. We combined all these pieces together. And this technology, which we ended up with, not only removes the obstacles and risks, but also creates fantastic opportunities, such as add-on can now run completely independently from JIRA server. You can choose whatever hosting you want. You can develop the add-on in any technology you want. You can do this with Node, with Python, with .NET, with Java. You can develop the add-on in C if you want. And all these things taken together actually means that you can integrate now any cloud service with JIRA Cloud.
And this is how we have ended up with the new platform, a new add-on platform in JIRA. Actually, not only in JIRA, but also in other Atlassian products as well. It is called Atlassian Connect, and it is only thanks to the massive effort of our ecosystem and developers outside of Atlassian that this release was possible. They have spent hundreds of hours helping us in making the platform stable and making sure that the coverage of the plugin points is good enough for the platform to be released. And as you all know, Atlassian Connect 1.0 was released earlier this year. And it actually has become a huge success as well from the very beginning. When we met in Berlin during Atlas Camp in June this year, I told you that we already had 20 Atlassian Connect add-ons for JIRA, 20 public Atlassian Connect add-ons for JIRA. And since then, this number has doubled. What you can see here is actually a number that I brought up a few days ago when I was building this presentation. But I already know that a lot of vendors, a lot of developers kept the releases of their add-ons to the very end before Summit. So this number is already outdated. It's much, much higher than that. And it's actually going to grow. It's going to grow because we are still investing in Atlassian Connect platform. We are making sure that the coverage is getting better. So let's take a look at this little graph. More than a year ago, if you were to approach me and ask me, how can I build an add-on for JIRA, I would say you should probably go with a P2 platform. Atlassian Connect was being built at the time. The plugin point coverage wasn't complete, the platform wasn't stable at that time yet, and the P2 platform was the platform of choice. Today, when it comes to plugin point coverage, Atlassian Connect is advancing this coverage really, really fast. It's already possible to build really, really solid add-ons using Atlassian Connect in JIRA, but as you can see, the plugin point coverage isn't complete yet. We hope that in a year from today, if you ask me this very same question, I will be able to say that I'm almost certain you can do everything in Atlassian Connect that you were able to do in the P2 world. And we are actually going to invest a lot into making sure that this is possible. And to the extent that Atlassian Connect platform is also going to be provided for the server instances as well. But as you can see on this little design, on this little graph, there are still going to be certain use cases where Atlassian Connect coverage is not going to be available in a year from today. These are very specific use cases, very in-process type of integrations where Atlassian Connect, by its design, is not going to be a native type of platform. We have designs and architecture discussions in order to solve these problems, and we will eventually get there. But for the time being, P2 platform and Atlassian Connect platform are going to coexist, and basically we provide it together. So as you can see, we are investing a lot in Atlassian Connect. We believe that Atlassian Connect is the best strategic opportunity for the ecosystem in JIRA. We believe that this is the way of expanding onto new markets, especially those markets of software as a service offers. As you could see in the previous slide, this is where we are observing the highest growth today. And we believe that Atlassian Connect is the platform to build the add-ons moving on. In JIRA 7, but also today. I can even say more. We believe that the year 2014 will be remembered by future generations as the year of change, where the P2 era stopped and the Atlassian Connect era started to flourish.
Okay, Bartek, let me stop you for a second. Don't you think you already said enough about the history and you showed enough graphs for them?
I think I did.
Okay, so let me talk about the actual things which we have in Atlassian Connect in JIRA today. So I will start with the high-level overview of the building pieces of Atlassian Connect in JIRA. We have JIRA server running somewhere in the cloud. We have an add-on server running somewhere in the cloud as well. Finally, we have a web browser that displays the information coming from both Connect add-on and JIRA server to the actual user. How do they integrate with each other? So to start with, we have a REST API, which allows both add-on and user to set some data in JIRA. We have webhooks, which allow the add-on to listen for some specific type of changes which are happening in JIRA. We have the UI integration that actually allows add-on to display some information for the user within the JIRA page. And finally, we have the new thing for the integration, which is called entity properties. They are really exciting. I will talk about them in a minute. For the REST API, at the moment, we have 120 resources, and most of them accept multiple HTTP methods, which means that, let's say for issue, you can create a new issue with HTTP post. You can update the issue with HTTP put. You can remove this with delete, and you can retrieve all of them or a single of them with HTTP get. Some time ago, we decided to deprecate our SOAP API, and we started rewriting this to REST. At the moment, our REST API is covering 84% of the API which we had in SOAP, and this is changing. It's taking us a little bit longer than we actually expected. So we no longer plan to remove our SOAP API with JIRA 7.0. We plan to remove this with JIRA 8.0. But please don't wait for the last moment. Our REST API already covers a lot of things, so I bet that you can actually develop your add-on without touching SOAP API. The other thing for the integration are webhooks, and they are basically a callback message in JSON format that informs you that there was something which happened in JIRA which you are probably interested in. So you can register the URL on which you listen for the changes with UI, with REST, or with a module descriptor of your Connect add-on. And the changes about which you are going to be informed at the moment relate to issue and workflows. But as I speak, the JIRA ecosystem team is expanding the coverage to comments, attachments, projects, versions, and worklogs. The third and very important piece of integration is UI. We let you plug your rendered HTML into the JIRA frame seamlessly. What you're going to provide us is going to be context-aware, which means that it's going to get the information about the project in which it was displayed and about the issue in which it was displayed as well. So at the moment, we are supporting 11 elements of the UI integration, and we are working on the Connect replacement of the gadget. And the last thing which lets you integrate add-on and the JIRA server are entity properties, and they basically allow you to store any arbitrary JSON against some JIRA entities. They are fantastic because not only they give you the backup and all the stuff which you get from JIRA, but they also allow you to create a purely JavaScript add-on which lets you to store the data. And the entities with which you can associate some JSON at the moment are issues, projects, and comments, but we are also extending this to a per add-on private entity store and with a dashboard.
Thanks, Philip. So let me go back to what product managers love most, so speaking about the future. Before I do that, I have to show you this mumbo-jumbo slide. It's a legal requirement from our team. So what are we working on right now? Some time ago, we have contacted a number of our leading developers who have a very successful P2 add-ons on the marketplace. And we have asked them a very basic question. What do you need from Atlassian Connect perspective in order to be able to translate your P2 add-on into Atlassian Connect? And we have gathered the responses from them and prioritized them in a single backlog. And the team, the JIRA ecosystem team, is actually working through that backlog as we speak. We have contacted only a few of these developers, but we hope and we believe that we can extrapolate from their requirements onto the wider ecosystem. And the reason for that is that we not only address their very specific point requirements, we are actually building a bit wider response to their needs. And a good example of that are webhooks that Philip has just mentioned. We have heard a number of requirements pertaining to webhooks, but we decided that in order to satisfy them properly, we need to redesign a bit the architecture of how webhooks work. So the massive changes that are coming with webhooks are actually triggered by the very specific point requirement that we have heard. During yesterday's JIRA keynote, Brian Rollins has described some of the upcoming features. And one of that is the new JIRA Navigation focusing around the project. Part of that navigation, without going into details what exactly it is going to be, is the new sidebar. And the sidebar as the new GUI element is, of course, going to be pluggable, as seen from the ecosystem perspective. Not only it will retain the backwards compatibility with the project tab panel plugin point, it is actually built using the web items. So it will provide the new locations for your GUI elements to be displayed within the JIRA GUI. As we are going through the redesign of the navigation within JIRA, we have also decided to fix and simplify some of the other elements. And one of such elements is the project summary page. We have performed several analytics exercises, and we have found that it is considered to be a little difficult to use. So therefore, we decided to simplify it a lot and made it much, much easier. Again, from the plugin and add-on development perspective, the new page is going to be backwards compatible, and all the locations for the web panels are going to be retained. We are actually introducing a few more just to be able to allow you to put the content in the places where they belong best. But this is not where we finish the simplification process. Another element that is undergoing a redesign is the components list. We decided to simplify that, and basically instead of providing a multiple page experience, I provide you with a very, very simple list of components then linked to Issue Navigator. Now, because of that simplification process, we have asked ourselves a question, is the components tab panel plugin point still required? So we have performed a scan of all the plugins, the P2 plugins on the marketplace, and we have found that only 2 of the vendors actually use that. So we have asked both of them, do you mind if we remove that plugin point? And they said, go ahead, it's actually going to simplify our code as well. So we decided to basically remove it for the sake of simplicity. And a very similar process has happened around the version list. Again, a lot of simplification that is coming required us to ask ourselves a question whether the version tab panel is still needed. Again, a couple of vendors, both of them said, we are fine with that. So another plugin point never used that is going to be removed. As I mentioned before, these changes can only happen with the major release of JIRA, so do not be afraid. It's only going to happen in JIRA 7. There will be announcement prior to that, so you will hear about it again. Another page that is undergoing a redesign is the report list. Previously in JIRA, you remember probably that's just a textual list, not very beautiful. We decided to make it much, much more attractive and easier to read. With the assumption that the existing report plugin point needs to be backwards compatible. So we are extending this plugin point. And right now, it will be possible to also add a thumbnail for the report, as well as description, as well as a category in which the report is supposed to be displayed. Small changes, but making it so much easier for users to use this page in case there are multiple reports. Finally, something that you have also seen during the keynote yesterday is the new version page. What you see here on the screen is one of the mock-ups that we have built on the way to actually develop this solution. Do not attach to the way how it looks and feels. It's probably going to change before we actually make it into the final release. It's actually going to hit the labs as an experimental feature on the cloud pretty soon. When it comes to add-on development, we are planning to add the pluggability of that very page as well for both the P2 and Atlassian Connect platforms. However, the details of that pluggability are not decided completely yet, so I do not want to confuse you with the information that is probably going to change again.
Okay, that's all from us. Thank you for being here and listening to us. If you have any questions, just let us know. We are here for you. We want to hear about your stories, your problem with JIRA ecosystem. We want to make both JIRA ecosystem and your add-ons as successful as it's possible. And we are going to give the stage to Ian. Thank you.
How's it going, everyone? Just before I start, a reminder, we've got this bit.ly/ask-Atlassian site. So if you go on there, you can ask some questions. I saw a couple come in already, but we should have a little bit of time at the end to answer some of those questions. Otherwise, Bartek and Philip are around the Ecosystem Partners Lounge. That's the Spartes booth today, and I'll be spending my time at the JIRA booth. So, all right. Today I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about some of the changes needed to be able to support Data Center. I'll be going into some detail about web resources and some of the changes that we're making around the web resources API. And then I'll go into a bit of detail about how you can keep in the loop with some of the changes as they're happening for JIRA 7 for some of the things that we can't go into explicit detail today. So I'll start out by talking about Data Center. So who here has written a P2 add-on? Could you raise your hands, please? And of those, keep your hands up if you currently support Data Center. All right. So it seems like some people still haven't done the changes required, so hopefully this will be of some use. There is an excellent guide online on developer.atlassian.com called Plugin Guide for JIRA High Availability and Clustering. And that details in intricate detail a lot of the kind of manual work that you have to go through to be able to tick that box and say, yes, I support high availability and clustering. There's also an excellent talk by Chris Fuller from last Atlas Camp that's also available online, preparing your plugin for JIRA Data Center, if you prefer to listen to someone talk about it. But this kind of details the mechanical steps that you have to go through, but it doesn't talk about some of the gotchas where you'll go through the mechanical steps, get to the end, put your plugin onto a JIRA Data Center instance, and then find that the performance just tanks. So I'll just talk through a couple of kind of gotchas now. To start with, I'll just talk about caching. So there are some changes you need to make to be able to support caching in a data center environment. But after doing those, you may find that the caches perform differently from how they used to in a JIRA server environment. So invalidating a cache, for example, is significantly more expensive in a JIRA Data Center world than it is in a JIRA server world. So the time where you could previously just load everything into memory in the JVM and everything would be sweet is kind of starting to be over. So I highly encourage you to kind of cast a critical eye over each of your caches as you're doing those conversions to see whether or not they're still necessary or whether going to the database is actually not that expensive in that particular case. Or potentially using a request level cache instead of a clustered cache across multiple nodes. Secondly, cluster locks are a bit of a code smell. So there is a mechanism by which you can acquire a cluster lock across all of the nodes execute a critical section of code exclusively across the entire cluster, and then release that lock. And as you can imagine, this is actually a pretty expensive operation. So as part of doing your conversion, you may find that you have some storage in plugin settings or property sets or any other kind of key value store, Bandana, for example, if you're in the Confluence world for Confluence Data Center. And you may be tempted to be like, okay, I need to support JIRA Data Center. I'll just put a cluster lock around this critical section, which I used to have a lock in the JIRA server world, and everything will be correct, which is fine, except you need to be very careful when doing that due to the expensive nature of acquiring a cluster lock. We've already had some incidents in production on Jack, whereby cluster locks are acquired in significantly more frequently than we would expect through a HTTP GET to a popular page, for example. In those cases, we found that the cluster would just grind to a halt, just trying to acquire and release these cluster locks. So when you do see that you're reaching for a cluster lock, just think about potentially whether you can change to using active objects or some other storage mechanism to be able to avoid using a cluster lock and push that concurrency to the database. Background tasks. So if you have background tasks, you should be using Atlassian Scheduler. You can potentially hack something together yourself, but you'll find that you'll end up solving pretty much all the same problems that Atlassian Scheduler is. And we also encourage people to use Atlassian Scheduler due to other changes that we might make behind the scenes for Atlassian Scheduler over time that you'll be able to benefit from. So any monitoring we build into Atlassian Scheduler, you would just benefit from, as opposed to building your own thing, which would then not show up inside that. So if you do all of that fantastic work, you get this excellent badge of honor. Congratulations. It's not a large amount of screen real estate, but it is very important for our data center customers to be able to make sure that they can access the full range of add-ons in the marketplace. So now I'll deep dive a little bit into some of the changes we're making in web resources. So CDN is coming. So we're currently working on CDN support for our cloud offering, and starting to roll that out across our cloud offering. And as part of doing that exercise, we had to change some APIs to be able to support CDN. Now, there's nothing to stop you from not implementing these APIs and continuing to work as you are at the moment, but we're starting to look at whether or not CDN is a capability that we want to extend out to our server and data center customers. So if you look at this set of changes, they're not actually a large amount of changes. It's probably worth doing anyway. So I'm just going to run you through some of the things that we need to do around web resources to be able to support CDN. So firstly, and this is kind of tangential but also related to CDN, is to watch your batch size. So we have a number of front-end performance issues in JIRA, and we're starting to slog through them. And a lot of our front-end performance is for initial page load is dictated by how much JavaScript and CSS we're shoving down to the client and how much of it they actually need. So we have some batches that are starting to become megabytes in size, and the issue is often a plugin comes along, adds themselves to a context batch such as ATL General, includes a third-party library like Draw2D, and ends up bringing in an extra megabyte worth of JavaScript onto every single non-admin page of JIRA. So it's very important to be very careful about how much you bring in, as well as potentially trying to break those dependencies so that you can use the web resource manager, the dynamic one, to be able to load in the additional JavaScript you need as you need it. So keep a close eye on the size of your batches as you're doing your plugin development to make sure that you haven't increased the size of, say, the view issue batch by a megabyte through your plugin 2 add-on. The next change, which is more related to CDN, is making static resources more static. So the conditions, web resource condition, web resource transformer have a number of issues whereby it's possible to pull out information about a specific user and then include that information inside the batch. And this is something we're trying to move away from. We're trying to move it towards static resources being static, which would be fantastic. We're also looking at ways that static resources can at least contribute the information in a hash form into the URL when they do include some additional information. And that way, if we cache those static resources on a CDN edge node, it won't end up breaking when another user comes in, gets a resource which previously, because it was hitting the JIRA server, would end up being different, but because we are going to a CDN edge node, JIRA is no longer involved, and you will end up getting a resource for another user and things will start breaking. There is an excellent guide on developer.atlassian.com, stateless web resource transforms and conditions, that details the conditions to and transformers to APIs. If you do implement a web resource transformer or a condition, have a look at that. But in general, cast a critical eye over your code and see whether or not you actually need those conditions and transformers to be able to do what you're doing. You may potentially be able to get rid of the transforms, for example, and build that into your build process. And for conditions, you may be able to include the JavaScript on the page all the time and guard it by an if statement inside JavaScript, which will mean that you'll end up with much better cross-page cache coherency for the CDN edge nodes. So I've talked a little bit about data center and web resources, but there's a number of changes that are coming up in JIRA 7, some of which we can talk about in hand-wavy kind of terms like Bartek was talking about for the new versions page, and some of it we can go into intricate detail. So for example, we're looking at doing a upgrade of the plugin framework. And as part of that, there will be a number of changes that you will need to make to your P2 add-ons to be able to support the new versions of the plugin framework. There's also going to be a large amount of deprecated method removal. So 7.0 being a major version, we reserve the right to actually do some cleanup around our API. There's a large number of deprecated methods inside the JIRA API. I think it was north of 10,000 or something at last count, which is pretty depressing. So we would love to go through and do a lot of cleanups, but we can't talk about the intricate details of every single change that we're making right now. So you need much better tools to be able to keep in the loop. So I'm going to go through about 5 or 6 different things that you can do there. Hopefully some of this isn't news, and hopefully you'll get something out of this. So first, there's an excellent preparing for JIRA X page, where X is the next version of JIRA. This is the one for 6.3. We're still preparing the page for 7.0 at the moment to try and work out exactly what we're going to put there. This page will be available for 7.0 as soon as we are ready to publish it. So keep an eye out on developer.atlassian.com for that page, which will outline a kind of summary and detailed and links out to details for each of the changes that we're going to make. There are also EAP releases. So EAP stands for Early Access Program. And this is a way for us to release versions in development of our next major version. So when we get close to the end of a major version cycle, we will start releasing EAPs, which you can then download and run against your add-ons to be able to verify that they continue to work or exactly how spectacularly they blow up in that new version of JIRA. There's also the developer updates mailing list. So this is one that was actually news to me because I'm an internal to Atlassian, so it's not something that I've ever thought about. But there's a email settings inside my.atlassian.com, and you can opt in to the developer updates mailing list. On that mailing list, we'll often send out emails when, say, the preparing for JIRA 7.0 page is released, so that you can get a reminder to go and take a look. There's also answers.atlassian.com, and I'm sorry, I believe this is an old screenshot of the old answers, but this is an excellent resource if you start running into problems on a upcoming major version of JIRA to be able to get help, not just from people internal to Atlassian, but the wider Atlassian add-on development community. And then finally, there's the source download option. So once 7.0 is released, you'll be able to download the source for that product off my.atlassian.com, just like anyone else, any other product. So this gives you the option to kind of deep dive into the code when things start to not behave the way you expect, and we're not answering on answers.atlassian.com as quickly as you would like. A great tool for debugging if you can link this into your IDE. And in general, I just managed to fill 15, 20 minutes vaguely talking about a large array of changes that could be happening for your P2 add-ons. So if you want less maintenance, I highly recommend you at least give Atlassian Connect a shot. Give it a go, see whether or not you can implement your current add-ons in Atlassian Connect, and give us the feedback about what is missing currently in Atlassian Connect. This will allow us to make sure that we build out the APIs effectively as we try and bring greater parity between what you can do in Connect and what you can do in plugins too, as well as allowing us to make sure that when we do start to look at whether or not moving to server is a good option, which is something we're starting to look at now in terms of where we're going in the future with the Connect framework. It'll mean that you'll be ahead of the curve for when that comes out. Thanks a lot.
All right. So we should have at least 10 minutes for questions for Ian, and we'll bring Bartek and Philip back up. And if you don't mind, we can throw the questions up on the screen. All right. Are there plans or suggestions on how to bulk convert issues to subtasks and then back again? Ian or Philip?
Unfortunately, no. No.
Well, that's simple enough. All right. Are there plans to include attachments in notification emails?
This is an interesting one. I don't think there's any work that's currently happening in attachments world for JIRA. There is some work going on at the moment for notifications in general. So maybe get in touch. We would be interested to hear about that. There's also potential work for JIRA to bring our attachment experience in line with Confluence's new attachment experience. So this might be something you'll see in the future.
My organization has a great dependency on the version tab panel. Will there be a equivalent or close to it replacement in JIRA 7?
Right, so as I mentioned, the new version screen is also coming with its own set of locations for plugins for the GUI pluggability. So it's not going to be a direct replacement, but definitely a migration path from the existing tab panel to a new location where the information can be displayed. I would actually like to hear more about your specific use about that very plugin point. What is being displayed there? How much real estate of the screen do you need? Is this something that needs to exist on its own full page screen, or is it something that can be basically added to the report that is provided for the version? So I'm not sure who has asked this question, but please find me later. I'd like to dive a bit deeper into this.
Yeah, and if you swing past the JIRA booth and find me, I can give you a demo of the new version screen's work in progress, and I can point out the areas that are currently pluggable with web panels and web items, and that way you can get some idea of whether or not that actually fits in with your use case.
Also, I'm sure the lawyers would like me to remind you that the version tab panel isn't necessarily launching with JIRA 7 and may or may not come sometime in the future in a future release of JIRA. All right, let's move on to the next one. Will the Connect API changes be contrôlé the same way that the REST API is?
For our Connect API, we give you 6 months deprecation notification period. So yes, all our Connect API and REST is actually part of our Connect API, has the same deprecation policy. So if anything changes, we are going to inform you.
Yeah, so I think that Connect has a 6-month deprecation policy, and then it backs onto the JIRA REST API, which has the API policy of JIRA. So you might get more for the REST API than you do for some of the Connect specific stuff.
Are there plans to search for issues using updated by?
I don't think that requirement has come up recently when we have spoken with the developers. I have mentioned this is, like I said, our priority right now to satisfy these most pressing demands of the developers. But if I'm not mistaken, this is something that we already have quite highly voted as one of the feature requests for JIRA. So I'm pretty sure we will dive into this sometime in the future.
We have a lot of questions. Awesome. Are there plans to address plugin resource independence for Jira Server and Data Center instances?
Yeah, so I think that this pertains to Connect potentially moving behind the firewall. It's something that we're looking at some point in the future. We're in very early days as trying to work out the architecture of how we would move Connect behind the firewall. There's also some potential for changes inside the JIRA API to be able to improve plugin resource independence and the scheduling and that kind of stuff between plugins by borrowing some stuff from Stash. So Stash have done some excellent work in this area for P2 add-ons, which give us a little bit better plugin resource independence, but it's fundamentally a hard problem when you're in the same JVM. So moving to Connect is the kind of direction we would hope to be going in for this.
Is that our last? Oh, no. Are there plans on editing assignee and setting on creation triggers? And
Yep, yes.
Okay.
So this is a very hot topic at the moment. There's a Jack issue for this, which is getting a lot of traction. Oswaldo on the bug fix team was talking to me just before I left about some of the options for tackling this particular issue, and I think that the bug fix team will be tackling this fairly soon.
We need to
I think there's a comment on that issue recently.
Yeah, I think that Oswaldo may have
yeah.
commented quite recently about this, saying that they're going to be tackling this very soon. So.
Is that it? All right. Thank you all so much for coming.